Hello, everyone. This is Rick, and welcome to Astral Club. This is 4 cringe questions about astral projection. Before we get into it, just want to mention Patreon. If you'd like to support Astral Club on Patreon, you can certainly do so. When you join, you get advanced episodes, a chat and a direct mail function, and also videos for your mobile apps. If this is something you're interested in, you can go down to the description section and just click on the link. Next up, private lessons. If you'd like a lesson to astral project, we do so over the internet using Zoom. Be glad to work with you. Many people have had some great experiences. I've gotten a lot of emails saying they projected anywhere between that night until a number of months later. If that's something you're interested in, just go down to the description section and send me an email asking for more information. Okay, cringe questions that folks have asked me. I've done a lot of different scenarios where I teach astral projection. YouTube is the newest. In the old days, I used to teach personal classes. People would come to my house from hundreds of miles away, and I'd give them a 3-hour lesson, and they'd have everything they needed to be able to astral project successfully. That was great, but I also did classroom questions. I'd go to this school, and it was called Elizabethtown College. And in the summertime, they had these New Age fairs, and I'd teach astral projection there. And we'd always have big classes. It was a lot of fun. A lot of good energy generated in that situation. I even had people who projected for the first time in the class. I can't even imagine that with 50 people around, but it happened. At any rate, every now and again, I would get cringe questions. Questions that you really shouldn't be asking me. And I usually don't forget those. And I've answered thousands and thousands and thousands of questions over the years. But these stick in my head much more so than any other questions. Okay, so the first cringe question is the most memorable to me. I call it the Peeping Thomas question. I was at Elizabethtown College teaching a course on astral projection in the summertime, and we had a nice big class. It was like 50 people. They had to give me a bigger room because they hadn't given me a big room, and they always did that to me. So we had this big class, and there was this, I don't know, I think it was around 18-year-old young man. And he raised his hand. As a matter of fact, when I said, hey, let's have some questions, he was the first to raise his hand. And I always appreciate that, because even if you're online or if you're in like a classroom session, for instance, there's always that inhibition. Like no one wants to be the first person to ask a question. So you almost want to have a person on your side in the classroom to ask the first question, to break the ice so that you can actually get things rolling. But hey, he raised his hand right away, and I was grateful at first. And then he asked me the Peeping Thomas question. He said, I like this girl, but I'm too shy to approach her. So I was wondering, could I use astral projection to go into her bedroom at night and see what she's up to? I was taken aback by this question, as you might expect. I've answered so many of these questions. That usually doesn't happen to me, but this was a first. And I hesitated at first. I thought to myself, I got to give this kid an out, because I noticed some people in the audience who were sitting next to him. They kind of gently moved over. But I felt bad for him. I said, listen, I think what you're saying, I think I know what you're saying. You're saying that you're going to get up the courage and you're going to, ask her and talk to her about astral projection and get up, a relationship going. And then you'd want to ask her permission, to project to her at night. I was figuring that he'd take this out. No such luck. He goes, "Oh no, I just want to do it secretly so I can see what's going on. Geez. I basically said, well, talk to me after class. We'll discuss that. And then I went on and took other questions. That poor guy. I don't know what was wrong with him. Next up, let's call it bank robbery. Okay. I've had people ask me from time to time, would it be possible to go into a bank vault in the present or the future, let's say, and to, borrow a couple of things inside the vault? Well, of course, I said right away that that is not a moral question to be asking, certainly a bit cringe, and that, we need to move on and see what other questions are going on. But just between you and I, yes, it is possible to go into a bank vault. If you did so in the present time, you'd go in and then you'd find that you were unable to manipulate any physical objects. But let's say you're an extraordinary individual, and let's say that you practice astral projection for months, possibly years, and then fix your will to a point where you can, using every bit of energy that you have stored up in your astral and physical bodies, by the way, you're able to move 1 troy ounce, which for our metric friends is about 31 grams. Okay, so you grab yourself a 1 troy ounce gold coin. But your hand is inside of a deposit box. You're not going to be able to do anything with that. That coin is just going to rattle around at best inside that deposit box. Okay, so then you say to me, okay, Rick, what if I go into the future? You say that sometimes it's possible into various futures to be able to handle more heavier objects and to move things. And that is true. So let's say that you go ahead and after all these months and also experimentations now in time travel, because that's not easy either. It took me quite a while to master it, if indeed I have mastered it. Okay, let's say you've done all that, invested all that energy, and now you get inside the bank vault, and yes, you could open up a deposit box. Congratulations. You grab a bunch of coins, and then you leave the vault. But when you get outside, you find that your hand is empty. Why is that? Well, yes, you could move things around, but the one thing you couldn't do is to get it out of the bank. Now all you have is those coins lying on the vault floor. So I suppose when the manager opens the bank in the morning, he might think that those coins became like the Toy Story toys, that they came alive when the vault was closed. So you might spook them a little bit, but the bottom line is you're not any richer. So invest your energies in anything other than bank robbery. Number 3, the lottery. I have this question probably asked more often than anything else. Luckily, not on a daily basis, but it comes up. People say, hey, can I use the ability to time travel to win the lottery? And the answer is yes. Is it legal? Oh, it's on the borderline to begin with. Now, I'm sure that the pages and pages of little rules associated that you agree to, whether you know it or not, when you play the lottery, it says in there that you can't be using systems or any other way to cheat the lottery other than pure luck. And certainly there's probably an out moral situation there as well. But when I was 18, I did an experiment, and I was more concerned with the science of it, quite frankly, because I knew that it would take a lot of time to make happen. It took me about 6 months to make happen. At first, I tried the big lotteries, where you have to memorize all these 2-digit numbers. What I found is that that was almost impossible, because the astral vision and the way the memory works when you go back into the physical, it's difficult, not impossible, but difficult to read and to memorize numbers, especially a lot of 2-digit numbers. The 3-digit number one was possible, but how much would you get out of that? The 4-digit, there was more money involved, and it was easier to try to memorize 4 numbers. So what I did was I would put something on my door with the 4-digit winning lottery, and I date it. And my idea was travel to the future, travel to the future. It took me months to make this happen, but eventually I got that 4-digit number, and I went ahead and plunked down $1, and I won a decent amount of money that I could use to buy some books. I've never repeated it because I don't want to waste another 6 months worth of projections to try to make that happen. And it's probably a bit on the not so moral side. So that's not something that I'm really interested in. But there you go. It certainly is possible, but a little bit on the cringe side. Next up is torment enemies. I remember I was having a private lesson, and it was going great. I mean, the guy was really prepared. He was really enthusiastic. He had a long list of questions he'd written out, which I find is very rare. Most people just don't want to do the work up front. They come in and they wing it. The problem is when you're sitting there having your private lesson, you can't think of all the questions that you want to ask, which is why it's great to prepare ahead of time. And this guy was prepared. Well, he had great questions. We went through the whole thing. It was at least an hour's worth of questions, as I recall. But when we got to the last one, I understand why he saved it for last, is he wanted to know if he could get back at his enemies using astral projection. I was a little taken aback. I was not expecting such a question from him. And I don't get those kinds of questions, which is great. Just it talks about the kind of people who are interested in astral projection. I recall I said something like, well, that's just not a proper use of astral projection. So let's go on and do this exercise now. Just to try to dispel the awkwardness that kind of creeped up in the room when he asked that question. Now, however, it's just between you and me now, so we can talk about this a little bit. Is it possible to annoy, torture, scare your enemies using astral projection? Theoretically, it is possible. However, it will probably cost you more than it's going to cost them. And let me explain why. When traveling in the present, your ability to move physical objects is basically nil. If you practice for months and most likely years, fixating your will and all of your energy, and I'm talking all the energy in your astral self and all of the energy in your physical, you might be able to eventually do things like make a knock, maybe knock something down, for instance. And of course, when you get back to your physical body, you're going to feel like you've got the flu because you're going to be completely helpless for the next 24 hours because of the energy expenditure to do that. But you could do it. And let me explain to you why the poltergeist phenomena is what it is. Generally, when people talk about poltergeists, there's things like objects moving, knocks, that kind of stuff. But usually they're spaced out. They don't happen constantly. Typically, they happen, let's say, once every couple of weeks. That certainly was my experience with my little poltergeist, that young lady who died of a drug addiction in my apartment building, which back in the old days had been an abandoned textile factory, that she needed a couple of weeks each time, which is why the occurrences were stretched out. Because just that one knock on my door, it totally depleted her energy. Then she needed a couple of weeks at minimum in order to recharge. And that's the way it works. So that's why the poltergeist phenomena is what it is, because of the huge amount of energy necessary in order to impact upon the physical world. So, yes, theoretically, it is possible. But, for what discomfort you're going to supply to your enemies, understand you're going to be sacrificing multiple times in that effort. So just heads up on that. And keep in mind that if you're an experienced traveler, which you probably would need to be in order to make something like this happen, there very well could be consequences. Because when you're an experienced traveler, they start to watch you. And they'll probably will be payment for an activity like that. But hey, we're talking about cringe stuff, and that's cringe. But, hey, it's weird, but possible. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed my 4 cringe astral projection questions. If you have any questions or comments about any of this stuff, please go ahead and put them in the comments section. Love the questions. I know everybody else likes reading the questions too as well. And any comments you have, any experiences that you've had, just let me know. At any rate, this is Rick, and I will see you on the astral plane.